Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention very quickly in the last video was like the Git lectures, I think this regular expression stuff is much more suitable to have like in the slides, to have all the commands I type and kind of what their output is. So it might not have every single little command I type, but it has the most important ones. Like here's like, I want you to know how to swap Taylor with Hunter, and this was the syntax for that. So all of the big key ideas, those commands will be in these slides. And so please go back and look at these for reference if you want to look at any particular command I used. So what I want us to do now is to talk a little bit about how to use regular expressions with sed. In some sense, there's nothing new. Regular expressions behave exactly the same as they do in grep. So, for example, if we go back to this names.txt file, suppose I want to replace all the words Joe with Hunter. So I don't want to change John, the J-O and John to Hunter. So this is where regular expressions come in to save the day. So I could do sed-r for regular expressions like normal. I do s to start the string, and then I type in a regular expression. So if we think back to last week, what's the regular expression to find a word that is equivalent to John? Well, we have to do the start word regular expression character, then J-O, and then the end word regular expression character. So everything that happens before, like in this first section, the regular expression is treated like a regular expression. And then I might type in Hunter for the rest, and then do names.txt. And so now you can see that Hunter or Joe got changed to Hunter, but the Johns were untouched. Now, one thing that's a little strange about sed in particular is that the thing that happens on the left, kind of the first argument, which is what you're looking for, that gets treated as a regular expression. So it's treating these kind of backslash backwaka as like the start of the word. In the text that you want to replace it with, for the most part, it actually doesn't make sense to have regular expressions there. For example, okay, suppose I wanted to put a dot here. What does replacing Joe with a regular expression dot mean? Because remember, dot is just something that matches anything. So this would actually replace it with a literal dot. So anything on that right-hand side, on the what you're replacing with, that is not a regular expression. The one key difference, though, there's one exception to that, which is back references. So just like last time, you can put things in parentheses, and you can refer to that inside the kind of second argument to sed. So that's going to replace Joe with Joe. But that's the kind of one exception. Besides back references, that second argument is basically just plain text. You don't have to ever escape things. So with that context, I want you to try tackling a problem on your own. So what I want you to do is I want you to work with emails a little bit. So suppose I had this file called emails.txt, which is in that directory if you downloaded the code. And what I want you to do is I want you to replace all uw.edu addresses with cs.washington.edu addresses. Now, one thing I forgot to mention or forgot to update in these slides is if you look in the file, some of the lines might already have cs.washington.edu addresses, and so we don't need to change. So you should only change uw.edu to cs.washington.edu. And to keep things simple, just print it to the console. You don't need to change the backup file or anything like that. So go ahead, take a minute or so, and try this out. Okay, so now that we've had some time to work on this, let's go ahead and try it out together. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to clear the screen. I'm going to cat emails.txt. And you can see that we have some emails here. These aren't real professors' email addresses. We've modified them a bit, but you can find all of their email addresses on the CS website. So I'm going to start by writing my sed command, sed-r, and I'm just going to write all of the kind of boilerplate stuff. So I'm going to put like my space for my pattern and what I want to replace it with, and emails.txt. So I want to go ahead and replace uw.edu with cs.washington.edu. So I could go ahead and write something like uw.edu here. And then I can match cs.washington.edu here. And if I type this out, this replaces all uw.edu with cs.washington. Now, one thing you could do, I think there's also kind of clever solution, is instead of matching the full .edu, you could just replace uw with cs.washington. That would also work, assuming you don't have someone that has like the email address uwu@uw.edu, right? So if someone had a uw in their name, then that might change that. But that also could be totally fine. So usually the patterns you write for sed are highly dependent on the data you're trying to work with. So you make assumptions about what is true and what's not true about your data, and you'd have to write a regular expression to match that. So if we are going to say that uw is not a valid username or part of a username, then the other solution will work. But otherwise, you might need to do something with like ending with uw.edu. Now, one thing that's a bit weird about this solution, this uw.edu, is that this dot here, since it's the first argument, it's the pattern defined, this is a regular expression dot, which means match any character. So if someone's email address was uws.edu or something like that, no dot, this would match because dot matches anything, including a period, which is why it matched. This shouldn't probably matter unless you really needed it, but if you wanted to match the literal dot, you can escape it. Notice you don't have to escape on the right side because it gets treated like regular text. The text on the right here is just plain old ASCII characters, so you don't need to worry about escaping them except for back references. Okay, so now kind of going back to our idea of sed and regular expressions, I want to go back to this names.txt, and I want us to try to change this file format a little bit. So right now, the file is starting with last name, comma, first name. And I want us to change that around. So that's first name, last name with no comma. So one thing that sometimes helps me when I'm trying to think of the sed command to do this is sometimes it helps me to start by grepping for something. So just to practice like getting the regular expression down or something like that, it sometimes helps me to just try to see if I can write something with grep to find the pattern I'm looking for. So if I'm going to write a pattern to try to swap first name and last name, what I probably need is a pattern to help me find the last name. So I might start with grep. So I might say grep-e, and then I want to search for the last name. So the last name is the first part of the line. So I'm going to do caret for starting the line. And then it's just any sequence of characters followed by a comma. And then if I do this in names.txt, it highlights all of those things. So start of a line, any sequence of characters, and then a comma. That regular expression helps me find that first name. And the reason I put this stuff in parentheses, which is not strictly necessary, right? It still works, is because I'm kind of preempting that I'm going to want to capture that in a group. So that then when I get to the sed part, I can go ahead and reference that group with a back reference. So that's usually the starting point is let's try to write a regular expression to match this stuff. Let's try to make this a little bit more complex now. Let's try to match the whole thing just to get ready for trying to match both the first name and the last name in their own groups by putting them in parentheses. So start of line, dot star to get any characters, put them in a group, then comma. Then I'm just going to assume that there's exactly one space, but I guess I could write this out to be space plus or something like that. And then I want some more characters, any sequence of characters after that, and then the end of the line. And there I have kind of matching everything. And the way I set up this regular expression is now I have kind of capture groups for the first and last name. So now this is a good time for me, now that I kind of have a better sense of what I want the regular expression to look like for searching for this stuff, I can now go ahead and try to write the sed command. I'm going to do sed-r s/, and I'm just going to write this exact same regular expression out. So any start of line, any sequence of characters, comma, space, any sequence of characters, end of line. You might be wondering why I use single quotes for sed and double quotes for grep. I actually don't know why. It's just like a weird behavior I picked up. We'll talk a little bit later that in some contexts, there's differences between single quotes and double quotes in Bash, but this is just a weird thing I picked up. So you start with that pattern that you want, and then what's the text you want to replace it with? Now, this is where we can use back reference. So I want to replace this text. I don't want to replace it with Hunter Schafer, because this is going to, I should put name.txt. This is going to replace everything with Hunter Schafer, which, for my birthday party, would probably be pretty fun. But I don't want to do that. What I want to do is somehow say, hey, go grab whatever string matched in this group. So I've set up two groups here, one for the last name and one for the first name. And we can refer to those groups by index. So there's one that's at index 1 and another that's at index 2. Now, if I want to do first name, last name in my output, I should do group 2 and then group 1. Because this first group up here captured the last name. That's going to be in \1. And then this group captures the first name. It's going to be in \2. And so I'm going to write out \2, \1. And remember, this is the one weird case where said replacing text is actually a regular expression. It works perfectly fine for back references. And now we have everyone by first name, last name, which is exactly what we want. And, you could do other things. Like, you notice we had the space here. You could put a dash, or you could say put like a placeholder for some middle name and another dash. You could do anything, put any kind of text you want there. If you wanted to, you can make like a little name anagram. So do something like this without any spaces. Anything you want, you could do here. So again, do remember that stuff that you put in the right-hand side, kind of that second argument, always treated literally except for back references, which let you match certain parts of your text. I'm going to go back to my original one like this. Now, I want to mention a couple things about sed. The first being, if I hit enter right now, I get an error. One of the very common things, especially when your sed commands get really, really long, is it's really easy to mess them up. So one thing you always have to remember is you need this like very basic structure of S followed by slash, and then like the stuff that goes here is the pattern you're looking for, and the stuff here is what you're going to replace it with. But it's very easy to forget some of those slashes. So if you look at my last command, I forgot the ending slash. Now if I run this. And unfortunately, sed does not give very helpful error messages. It just says, it kind of does. It says it's an unterminated S command, which is trying to tell you that you don't have that right formatting, but not the most obvious error message. So sometimes if I run into error messages, I start peeling apart my answer. Like maybe if I have this really complicated regex on the left-hand side, I start kind of working on it bit by bit, adding small parts to it back, starting from the empty string, until I can figure out what part's not working. The other thing I want to mention is when you read this, your brain might be doing too good of a job at remembering what we just talked about with regexes, because you might be wondering, oh, wait, isn't this upper caret? Doesn't that negate the search? So isn't this like trying to find all names that don't follow this format? And remember, that only applies inside character sets. So the caret symbol has two meanings in regexes. It might mean the start of a line, or it might mean negation inside character sets. So you have to know the context for when it's saying it. But don't worry, we all speak English. We're used to words changing meaning depending on context, right? It's just a bit strange when we're so used to programming, and it usually is very clear with its semantics, not regular expressions. They repeat symbols quite frequently, which is a little bit annoying. Okay, so now that we've practiced this, I want to go ahead and give you a chance to practice this on your own. So this one's going to be a little bit more challenging than the last one. So it's okay if it's a little tough. We'll talk about it afterwards. But what I want you to do is a very common task is extracting information from a file. So for example, if I have this emails.txt, I want you to extract all of the UW net IDs for people, or at least I guess CS net, UW net ID or CSE net ID. So go through and print out all of the usernames, but not the emails. So go ahead, take a minute, try that on your own. Okay, so now that you've had some time to work on that, let's go ahead and try it out. Oh, wrong thing I'm scrolling through. So I'm gonna go clear all this. I have that emails.txt, and I want to go extract all of the usernames. So let's go ahead and try this out. So I'm gonna do the sed-r business emails.txt. So here's a very tempting way to try to think about solving this problem. So you might say, okay, well, I want to start the line, and then I want to do, or start the sed pattern. So I want to do start of line, any sequence of characters followed by an at, right? Because that's all of the characters. We get to the at symbol. And then what do I want to replace that with? Well, I just want to replace it with the text inside that character group. So I want to replace it with something like whatever was captured there. But unfortunately, that's not going to quite work. The problem is sed is quite literal with what it does whenever you ask it to do something. It's saying, take this text here and replace it with this text here. So we asked it to replace the start of line, any sequence of characters, and an at sign. Take that substring and replace it with that whatever was matched in those parentheses. But there was other stuff at the end of the line there, which we never removed, which is exactly why, oh, whoops, I accidentally moved that, which is exactly why it's still printing out uw.edu or cs.washington.edu after each of those lines. So one thing that's usually a bit strange with when you write these regular expressions is you usually have to have extra parts of the regular expression to like clear out the rest of the line, to like match more of the line. But when you replace it, all of that stuff just disappears because it's only going to replace the part that matches. So there's a couple ways of doing this. You could actually go ahead and like write out, like uw or cs.washington.edu or something like that. But what's probably simpler is you could just go ahead and clear out the rest of the line. So just more stuff until the end of the line. There we go. You can optionally put that in a capture group if you wanted to, but I'm not going to need it. So I'm not going to use it. So that's it. That's how you do this stuff. Now, one other thing I want to quickly mention is you probably have noticed that in a lot of these last examples, I wasn't using that G flag anymore to say change every part of the line. Using that G flag depends on your situation. Are there going to be multiple matches on a particular line? In this example, I'm talking about one email per line, so it shouldn't matter. But sometimes it might matter. You might have multiple instances on a line and then you want to replace all of them. So that's one thing you just usually need to think about in terms of what are you going to include in that sed syntax or not. So the last thing I want to show you in our videos for today is an interesting application of this sed stuff. So sed is just all about find or replace. And I haven't necessarily taught you any new regular expression things today. It's all just this kind of weird sed syntax for finding and replacing stuff in files. And as I've mentioned multiple times throughout the quarter, is we can't necessarily teach you everything you might ever use these for, but we're teaching you foundations. We're teaching you things that you could use to solve any problem at hand. And maybe you don't know necessarily how to solve every single problem you run into, but you'll have a language to talk about, like with friends or colleagues or the internet, for asking questions and understanding their answers. So I'm going to show you a fun example of this. Parts of it probably won't make sense, but I'll promise you that there's some sense, nothing new in the sed stuff, the regex stuff that we're using. It's just more of the application stuff is a little bit weird. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and gathered one of the CSE web pages that lists out all the faculty. So if it doesn't look pretty because it doesn't have any of the styling, but it has all of this stuff, all of the professors. This webpage is actually a little out of date. We're not called lecturers anymore. We're teaching professors, but same deal. It has all the faculty members, and it has all their emails. So if you go find me, for example, there's so many of us. There I am. You might want to copy my email and then maybe send me an email. You might do something like this. So I just typed this command into Atu. But notice my email doesn't have an @ in it on our CSE website. This is to try to prevent spam because a lot of people write bots that just troll the internet looking for things that look like email addresses and then sending unsolicited spam emails to those people. So now that I've taught you sed and regular expressions, you can now use this power to great responsibility. You can write regular expressions and find replace patterns to parse pages. Web pages are just text. So if you look at any website, I'm going to use Chrome, but this kind of applies to any browser. If I do this inspect button, it opens up kind of a gross looking format called HTML. Maybe I can make this a little bit bigger. HTML is the raw text that determines what this web page is. If you're interested in web development, HTML is pretty crucial. You'll learn more about that in CSE 154 if you choose to take that course. But if you go look at my email field, you can see that it's my username, and then there's an image of an @ and then .cs.washington.edu. So our goal now is to extract all of these emails from this text file, because even though HTML does look pretty gross and can be very complicated at first, it's very well structured. It's just a very fancy structured text format. And this allows you to do really, really cool things with searching for things that match a particular pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to search for these ampersand images and try to extract the text around them. I'm not going to go through the process with you of actually writing the sed command, but I'll show it to you in 1 second. But I do want to show you that this CS faculty page is just text. And if you search for my name, you can find my email with that image there, that image for the ampersand. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, this is kind of like one of those cooking shows. Like Julia Childs has been cooking the thing the whole time so that you don't have to actually wait for it to finish. So here is my grep command. Now it looks kind of gross, but it's actually 2 commands. It's grep followed by sed. First thing it does is it greps to kind of remove almost all of the page that's not necessary. So it only narrows it down to the lines that are useful. And then we pass those lines, that output, to the input of sed. And all of that stuff, even though this stuff in sed looks really, really complex, it's actually nothing fancy. It's nothing new that we haven't learned. It's just searching for a bunch of white space, and then it's looking for this HTML tag that defines the image, and it's also kind of matching with these dot pluses. It's trying to match any sequence of characters to capture my UW-Net ID and the ending part of my address. And so if I run this, it gets us everyone's email addresses. So now that you know this great power of how to search text and modify text, please don't do anything nefarious. With great power comes great responsibility. But this really opens your toolbox for things that you can process and analyze. That data set isn't quite in the format you want, no problem. Just use sed to fix it. If you can write a pattern for the current format of the data and translate it to what you want, this really opens up a world of possibilities. So hopefully you see that how applicable sed can be, and hopefully you find a chance to use it. your next homework assignment will really focus on this regular expression and said stuff. So hopefully I'll see you in class where we can talk about this stuff, clarify anything confusing, or talk about further applications.